Tonight, beneath the rubble, stories of survival 296 hours after devastating earthquakes. A family rescued. A premier soccer player added to the staggering death toll. The helping hand behind the front lines.
My primary focus was to get the badly needed medical equipment and supplies to Ukraine.
The Canadian team bringing support to wounded soldiers. Plus, the investigation into systemic racism.
If things go the way they should, this police service will be disbanded.
Why Indigenous people feel unprotected in Thunder Bay.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. 12 days after one of the deadliest earthquakes this century, a miracle. 3 people were pulled alive from the rubble in Turkey, a remarkable rescue, considering hope is fading for other survivors after so long without food, water, or fresh air. The casualty count is growing, 46,000 people dead, among them the body of an international soccer star found today. As CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin reports, the road ahead is heartbreaking, but help from Canada is coming.
296 hours after the quake, rescuers searching for a family of 5 found signs of life. A man signaling there were others with him. 3 people were pulled from the rubble alive. The man, his wife, and their son. Though the 12-year-old boy later died of dehydration, his twin and his sister were dead. Stories of survival are now few and far between. The body of international soccer superstar Christian Atsu was found in the piles of debris of a collapsed 12-story building.
Going through the rubble as well, trying to yell for him, try to hear his voice.
Teammates had desperately been searching for him. Atsu was from Ghana and had been on the roster for several English Premier League teams. He scored the winning goal with his professional Turkish squad just hours before the quake. His former teams paid tribute to Atsu, a star on the field known for his good deeds off the field. His wife and 2 young boys were in the stands. The building's contractor was detained at Istanbul airport a week ago, apparently trying to leave the country. This as anger is growing over shoddy construction. Though there is some hope to be found for the little baby girl born during the earthquake in Syria and found in the rubble. She's doing well and now is in the care of her aunt and uncle, joining a newborn cousin. This girl means so much to us because there's no one left of her family besides this baby, he says. Her name is Afra. That was her late mother's name. Here in Canada, members of the Syrian and Turkish community are raising money
to feel their pain here from the other side of the world.
Some have also been pushing Ottawa to do more.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke to Turkey's president today, saying more humanitarian assistance from Canada is on the way and that the Canadian Armed Forces stand at the ready if needed. Sandy.
Geneviève, thank you. The family of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter is standing by his side as the 98-year-old receives end-of-life hospice care at his home in Plains, Georgia. America's oldest living president is refusing medical intervention after being in and out of hospital. In a tweet, his grandson, Jason Carter, writes, both his grandparents are at peace, and as always, their home is full of love. The former peanut farmer and Democrat was elected the 39th president, serving a single term from 1977 to 1981. His landslide loss to Republican Ronald Reagan paved the way for Carter to champion democracy, public health, and human rights, which he did for decades through his Carter Center Foundation. Well, the current U.S. vice president had strong words of condemnation today for Russia. Kamala Harris accused the Kremlin of crimes against humanity. CTV's Tom Walters reports.
In the words of war, this is an escalation.
The United States has formally determined that Russia has committed crimes against humanity.
Russia is already facing some 30,000 documented allegations of war crimes in Ukraine, but an accusation of crimes against humanity goes further. In effect, it's a call for the prosecution of Russia's senior leaders for deliberately targeting civilians in what U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris today called gruesome acts of murder, torture, rape, and forced deportation.
You will be held to account. In the face of these indisputable facts,
Harris was speaking at a security conference in Munich, where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken delivered what's described as a blunt warning to his Chinese counterpart to stay out of the conflict.
We are very concerned that China is considering providing lethal support to Russia in its aggression against Ukraine.
At the same time, Western allies stressed the need to provide more support to Ukraine.
Russia has committed violation after violation, and the international community's response has not been strong enough.
Right now, Ukrainian fighters trying to hold back the Russians at the city of Bakhmut say they are waiting for weapons. And the head of the EU is calling for Europe to ramp up arms production.
Invest in production lines now to be faster and to increase the amount they can deliver.
The message that Western support for Ukraine is not fading.
if Putin thinks he can wait us out, he is badly mistaken. Time is not on his side.
Of course, fueling a sense of urgency at the summit, the belief that Putin is not waiting. Russia is expected to launch a spring offensive, intensifying its attacks on Ukraine. Tom Walters, CTV News, Los Angeles.
It will soon be 1 year since Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine. Thousands have died, many more have been injured. Ukrainian hospitals are overwhelmed trying to keep up. Now, Canadian help in the form of desperately needed supplies has arrived. CTV's Brendan Strain traveled with a BC humanitarian group to Lutsk, northeast of Lviv, and gives us an inside look.
Almost every week in the city of Lutsk, there's a funeral procession for fallen Ukrainian soldiers. Also every week, more and more troops fill a local hospital. While they survive the front lines, their injuries are severe. The men openly share how they were hurt. This man says he and his commander were shot. This man was shot in the shoulder. The soldiers make up the majority of the hospital's patients. Shattered bones, open wounds, and shrapnel injuries are most common. Speaking through a translator, this doctor tells CTV News his facility is swamped and struggling.
The hospital is overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed by the wounded, but not without help.
They're doing between 100 and 200 patients a week. Over 9,000 patients so far have been treated in this small regional hospital.
Bob Beckett is with a small humanitarian group from Vancouver Island. His team brought 18 hockey bags filled with supplies to Ukraine.
Can we have another bag for the second hospital?
Bandages, gauze, braces, just a few of the much-needed items, all purchased through donations in BC.
My primary focus was to get the badly needed medical equipment and supplies to Ukraine.
The supplies will be shared with several hospitals, one of which specifically asked for specialized orthopedic drills to help repair broken bones.
It will also shorten the time of recovery and the healing process.
This man was wounded in Soldair after a grenade dropped into a trench where he was taking cover. The town in Ukraine's Donetsk region has been the site of intense fighting.
He hopes to get a prosthetic foot.
Another soldier so badly injured his left foot had to be amputated. It's a devastating blow, but he vows to keep fighting.
To come back to the front line, because he said that there is a lot of work that has to be done here.
And as long as there's people in need and hospitals desperate for help, Beckett and his humanitarian group will do whatever it takes to support Ukraine. Brendan Strain, CTV News, Lutsk, Ukraine.
At the security summit in Munich that we mentioned earlier, the U.S. Secretary of State not only questioned his Chinese counterpart about Ukraine, but asked him about the suspected spy balloon shot down over the Carolina coast.
I can tell you, no, there was no apology. And I told him quite simply that that was unacceptable and can never happen again.
Meantime, the U.S. military has suspended recovery efforts for the unidentified objects shot down last weekend near Alaska and Lake Huron. The RCMP has also ended its search in the Yukon because snow has made recovery difficult. A visible show of force in the nation's capital today, one day after a federal report vindicated the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act. Police anticipate a long weekend of demonstrations marking the one-year anniversary of the convoy crackdown. It was in the early hours of February 18th, 2022, when lines of heavily armed officers moved in. 24 hours later, the weeks-long occupation was over. Today, some of those protesters were back in Ottawa. CTV senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor reports.
As they've done most weekends over the past year, self-described freedom fighters returned to Parliament Hill. Today, under a heavy police presence, a larger than usual turnout, expressing discontent with a report on the law used to end last year's protest.
My purpose here is to protest my federal government, to practice my right to peaceful assembly and my freedom of speech.
Several hundred turned out today, expressing their usual grievances against vaccine mandates that have mostly been rescinded and shouting a familiar refrain. Police blocked them from marching on a pedestrian mall a block away where winter festival events were held.
Folks, if you're entering Winterlude, it's south, right, and right.
1 year ago today, police empowered by the Emergencies Act first took action to shut down the Ottawa occupation. Justice Paul Rouleau concluded in his report made public yesterday that the extraordinary measures were warranted.
Cabinet had reasonable grounds to believe that there existed a national emergency.
Rouleau said he regretted that the act had to be used, blaming it on a series of failures by police and by governments. In an interview airing tomorrow on CTV's Question Period, the Justice Minister admitted the federal response wasn't perfect.
Justice Rouleau mentioned that there was a certain disappointment in not having outreach with the protesters. All of these things are things for hindsight that we can perhaps do better next time.
Neither the report nor that concession likely to dissuade protesters who keep turning out.
This isn't going to budge those people who believe that there was nothing wrong with this protest.
None of Rouleau's findings are binding on the courts, and some protesters are continuing a constitutional challenge, claiming invoking the Emergencies Act violated their charter rights. Sandy.
Glenn, thank you. New details tonight about the deadly shooting rampage in rural Mississippi where 6 people were killed.
We're sad. We're shocked. We're shocked. We're going to miss our mom.
The suspect, armed with 3 guns, allegedly shot his ex-wife and 5 others at 3 separate locations. The 52-year-old has been charged with first-degree murder. Yesterday's attack marks the 73rd mass killing in the U.S. this year. And another shooting last night, this one at a gas station in Columbus, Georgia. A gunman opened fire on a large crowd, injuring 9 people, all of them under 18. Police believe an altercation at a nearby party spilled into the gas station parking lot. The children are being treated at local hospitals for non-life-threatening injuries. Well, FEMA, the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, has finally sent a disaster support team to East Palestine, Ohio, the scene of a train derailment. Residents are still fearful and demanding answers about hazardous chemicals and the safety of local drinking water. CTV's Richard Madden reports.
Frustration and fear bubbling up after that toxic train derailment in eastern Ohio.
What caused it?
More than 2 weeks since the fiery crash spewed chemicals in the air and water, resident Ben Ratner says an overwhelming stench still lingers.
The water itself really starts to smell. Even if the chemical is not an issue anymore, what kind of biological impact is it going to have?
He was one of the 5,000 residents evacuated during a controlled explosion to release the chemicals. Officials have since declared it safe to return home, but also confirm a 12-kilometer stretch of the Ohio River is now contaminated. More than 3,000 fish have died, along with pets and livestock on nearby land. Many who've returned now feel headaches, burning eyes, and are worried going outdoors.
My grandbabies, that's why I bought this property, so they could play in the creek and have a good time, but I ain't putting them in it this year.
Ongoing tests by Norfolk Southern Railway and the Environmental Protection Agency haven't detected chemicals in the air, but water is another issue.
I think that I would be drinking the bottled water, and I would be continuing to find out what the tests were showing as far as the air.
Environmental activist Erin Brockovich is demanding answers.
This community has every right to be up in arms and not trust what they're being told. I have not seen anything like this in our history of something so disastrous and so mishandled.
Residents are frustrated their questions aren't being answered, including why rail service has resumed while their own safety is unclear.
There's a level of just anxiety and insecurity whenever trains come by now.
And trains are going by right now, your place.
Yeah, you can hear it in my mic? Yeah. I believe this is the second or third one since we've been talking.
Officials are now monitoring if the contamination is spreading. Richard Madden, CTV News, Washington.
Coming up, allegations of racism within police ranks.
The original investigation was done so poorly and mishandled so badly.
A closer look at calls to disband Thunder Bay's police force. A heartbreaking farewell to 3 U.S. college students murdered at Michigan State. Family and friends said their final goodbyes at funerals for 2 of the victims at separate churches. A memorial was also held for the 3rd student. The shootings happened Monday night. The 43-year-old suspect died at the scene from a self-inflicted wound. 4 more students remain in critical condition. An investigation is underway into the high rate of homicides and hate crimes in Canada's murder capital, Thunder Bay, Ontario. The city's police force is also accused of failing to do its job. In tonight's Indigenous Circle, a podcast-turned-TV series uncovers the roots of alleged racism within the ranks and the broken trust. Here's CTV's Donna Sound.
There's something sinister going on.
Deaths of Indigenous young people in Northern Ontario and a police force accused of not doing its job.
If these were white kids, can you imagine the outcry?
That's the focus of a new documentary series called Thunder Bay, based on the groundbreaking podcast by Anishinaabe journalist Ryan McMahon. It focuses on 10 specific cases.
They're trying to hide something.
But he says there are many more.
There are 1,171 sudden Indigenous deaths.
Jordan Wabas died when he was 15.
The official story is he walked into a river and drowned.
Wabas's case was later reinvestigated.
The officer in charge of the reinvestigation said Jordan's case will haunt him for the rest of his life.
Indigenous leaders say there's a long history of racism within the city's police force, including accusations investigators didn't follow certain leads.
There have been concerns that there was a serial killer targeting vulnerable Indigenous youth.
Ontario Provincial Police launched a criminal investigation into some members of the Thunder Bay Police Service last year.
The story continues to evolve. You know, the OPP are inside the Thunder Bay Police Service investigating them as we speak. If things go the way they should, this police service will be disbanded.
He didn't make it home.
I think he was murdered.
Getting people to talk was a challenge for McMahon. As a father with teenage daughters, the need for him to tell this story is a life-saving mission.
There's not a day that I'm not scared for them, you know? This is why, you know, those of us that do this work have to fight so hard.
An investigation in search of truth and demanding change. Donna Sound, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead, accident at an art fair, picking up the pieces of a fragile sculpture. An oops moment at an art show in Miami. This porcelain balloon dog, one of thousands sculpted by artist Jeff Koons, broke into 100 pieces when a woman accidentally knocked it over. The famous work is worth $56,000 Canadian. A golden day in the French Alps for Quebec skier Laurence Saint-Germain, who was crowned the women's slalom world champion.
Every time I say that I'm world champion, it's kind of makes me laugh a little bit. It's kind of unreal still.
Saint-Germain is the first Canadian woman since 1960 to win slalom gold. She was third after the opening run, but shocked the field with an explosive second run to win today's event in Maribel, France. And we learned tonight that Peter Herndorf, one of this country's journalistic, arts and cultural leaders, has died. The Amsterdam-born lawyer served as head of the National Arts Centre for almost 20 years. After a long career in the media, Herndorf was awarded both the Order of Ontario and the Governor-General's Lifetime Artistic Achievement Award. Peter Herndorf died of cancer this morning in a Toronto hospital at the age of 82. After the break, the power of sport.
It's made me a lot stronger in the head. I'm a lot more confident. I'm a lot more happier inside.
Helping veterans with visible and invisible wounds. We leave it tonight with a story about a community on Vancouver Island playing host this week to wounded veterans and their guardian angels. They're offering up an adaptive winter sports program with a healing mandate, as CTV's Gord Kerpis reports.
They've gathered on Mount Washington for a first-of-its-kind opportunity for disabled veterans and their caregivers.
Our goal really is to get veterans and their spouses looking at what's happening in the future. And this program was to introduce them to possibly a sport that they didn't do before.
12 Canadian and 4 Australian veterans, all with various disabilities, are here for a week of adaptive snow sports, challenging the mountain and themselves.
The ability to slowly progress, and you can, as you get better, you just go up higher and higher and higher, and then as your confidence builds, get you ready for a chairlift.
Australia's Wayne Hopkins says the week-long program has been life-changing.
It's made me a lot stronger in the head. I'm a lot more confident, I'm a lot more happier inside, and it helps me interact with other people. So you get to talk to like-minded people, share experiences, and understand that what you're feeling is common to a lot more people than just yourself.
Sherry Hogg lost her leg 2 years ago and finds the Moving Forward initiative motivating.
It's been really great, like just to be able to move, because, you know, you just sit down and you just wait for life to happen until programs like this come around and you get to actually participate and be active.
Much of what is happening here is being documented by Elizabeth Newman, who's taking part to get a first-person look at the program.
I'm really kind of sometimes regretting this choice because I'm like, everybody is like in adventure, extreme sports, and I'm completely out of shape, and and I have a brain injury, so I represent the invisible injuries.
She hopes to submit the series to film festivals as well as sell it to Netflix to showcase the triumphs of the participants.
This made me realize that nothing is going to stop me. I feel like I can do anything.
Organizers of the event hope to continue and expand this worthwhile venture in the coming years. Gord Kerpis, CTV News, Mount Washington.
And that's our newscast for this Saturday. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Good night. Until tomorrow. Bye for now.